Yes, you can buy Lego stormtroopers. Hint. Hint. Okay. One thing real quick, and I got to tell you this because we have no idea what's going to be coming in the next couple weeks. Oh yeah, that's a done deal. So, don't forget, all of you know that's my webpage. I said Total Act, but if we all of a sudden have to miss a few days, as I cough, and then I should probably touch my face, but we're all going to have to miss. We might. I don't know. And if that happens, we got to operate under the idea that they're still going to have the AP exam at the same time. They might move it back, we might not. And so if they do close down or something happens, we have to miss some, which by the way, we do not want. You might think, yay, I don't want to go to school. No, you don't want to be going to school in July. So we don't want that. But if it does, I'll do as much as I can on my webpage. I have all my handouts. I'll give assignments, and we'll figure out what to do for classes and things like that. But we're going to do something. But all of you know my webpage, the Partridge Post, yeah.
I hope they talked about doing online school for all of the classes too.
Well, that would be tough. I mean, there's been no, let's put it this way. You might have heard a rumor. There's been no conversation amongst anybody who makes those decisions. Or at least they haven't told anybody who actually has to enact it like me. So this is going to be all done by me. And don't forget, if you go on here, you got the AP US History, YouTube, I have some things on DBQ, all the units, Kitty thing, plan, Mike Garrett. Okay, so like for example, we do the 20s. That handout I gave you with everything, I have the worksheets all here. That's the video. And if you ever check, you ever notice this? Every page I have supplemental notes. It says right there on top, notes. And that's why I told you, look at my webpage. There's a lot of stuff, but every handout that's on there. We'll play it by ear. I have no idea. Let's hope we don't have to. And every time I see that cat get knocked out, it makes me laugh. But you gotta admit, this is the funniest. It's this cat and that cat. All right, so. But I frankly just don't know. So where did we finish in here last time? We got a
volunteering.
No one volunteered for the war. We got to that. Now I'll ask questions as we go through. Nobody volunteered. Do we get to select? We got social unity, didn't we?
I wrote it down. And then you were mad because you didn't kiss me.
Oh, then I said curses. Oh, the anti-draft. What group was really anti-war? Socialists. Workers killing workers. Oh, so we got right to here, right?
Yeah.
So let's go to get jump. Ah! Okay. The Creel Commission. This was also called the Committee of Public Information, and this was the propaganda arm. George went away. We're just kind of looking at me. Okay, George Creel was a movie producer, and since he was experienced in this new media, he was a good one to push this propaganda. He made a number of short movies. I've never seen America's Answer. I've seen Under Four Flags, and it's bad. But it's supposed to be Italy, Britain, France, United States, all together. And they also sent out these speakers, and they called them Forward Minutemen. And they would go into schools, workplaces, and have meetings in companies, in parks, and they'd give a quick 4-minute speech to rally the country for war. But the biggest thing they pushed, fear the enemy. The enemy is all over. And that whole point gets back to the draft. It's the enemy that's against the draft. We have to fight against those who will make or to allow the Germans to win. Those against the war. Regardless if they're German or somebody else or Irish, we cannot trust. Ireland wanted independence from Britain. They actually revolted in 1916, the Easter Rebellion. And so a lot of Irish were pro-German. Remember, that's an enemy of my enemy becomes my friend, sort of thing. And so, we not only have that, breeding fear, But also then, just like I told you in countries with total war, the Espionage Act. And the Espionage Act, in its most generic sense, it bans any action against the government that might help the war effort. So this is actions. It bans any action that might hurt the war effort. Any action. But what's an action? Isn't everything an action? And what is espionage? It's a what? Yeah, it's spying. Government-sponsored spying. It's spying. By passing a law like that implies that the country's full of spies. Just passing a law like that makes people afraid. It's more than just a law. It's implying we need this law. There are enemies about. Now, were there spies? There were some, sure. German spies were active. There was espionage involved, spying on things. But then the next year they banned freedom of speech. Even though that was already by inference, illegal in the Espionage Act, the Sedition Act banned all criticism of the government. And the thing is, they would arrest 10,000 people. 3,500 would be put in jail. But every state also, every state in the Union, including Montana, would do a Sedition and Espionage Act, and they would arrest people too. And the whole point is not to find spies. The whole point is to stop what? Criticism of the government. They want to promote social unity. They get enough people encouraged by propaganda to fear and hate the enemy that they will speak, or they will not only be very nationalistic, but people themselves will shut up their neighbors and friends if they are against the war. And then anybody that still insists on talking, they might get arrested. And who decides what action or speech will hurt the war effort? Who decides this? Who's that? The government. Is it defined? It could be any number of things. So nobody knows what's illegal. It could be anything. Somebody could say one thing and nothing happens to it. Somebody else could say the exact same thing and they go to jail. You don't know. And if you don't know what will get you in trouble, how do you act? What would you say if anything you say could get you in trouble? Yeah, keep your mouth shut, right? And most people, this enforces social unity. And if you define what will get you in trouble, if you define that, that allows for more speech. Nobody knows. You just imagine, as they're watching this, they just don't like the way you look. Huh. That hat's off. I don't know if I trust that hat. Do you think that's funny? You're helping the Germans. No, but that's kind of scary, isn't it? And one more thing about it. If you get everybody riled up, let's say I say something about the war. Let's say we maybe should have reconsidered going to war with Germany till we really know the consequences of it. What would happen to me? There's no police in here. What's going to happen? One of you is going to do what? Yeah, one of you rats will go and tell on me, right? You go right up, and what would happen? I'd be gone. And by the way, Henry, since you told on me, what's going to happen to you? You'll be rewarded. You'll get a medal, maybe a Kit Kat, maybe an armband. Okay, that's my very scary allusion to what happened in totalitarian states under Nazi Germany. What do you think they gave kids in school when they told on their teachers? A nice little armband. You would be a hero. So the next time a teacher said something, what are you all going to do? It'd be a race to rat on me, wouldn't it? I'd be gone. The next teacher. You just didn't like him, which wouldn't it be easier to tell on to get rid of him? Totalitarian states can become very scary with this if you never know. And who's the target? Now the target at first, okay, Germans, right? Anybody helping the Germans? That makes sense. But how do we know someone's helping the Germans? I bet they have the same last name. What if their name is Schmidt? Right? We know they're from Germany. We know it. They live in Bismarck, North Dakota. We know it. That's named after the former German chancellor. By the way, isn't that a little scary, what I just said there? Just because if someone is of that ethnic group, they could be in danger. Isn't that one of the steps towards what horrible thing in World War? Genocide, isn't it? Once the thinking starts, that would never happen here, just wait. But also socialists, because they oppose the war. And one thing to remember about the socialists oppose the war. All right, and there's been a fear of a lot of Americans. Some really like socialists, some were opposed. But now, wasn't there just a successful socialist revolution? Where? In Russia. And could that be about to happen here? Once you get people fearful and scared, they start thinking that way. It's no coincidence that after World War I will be the first Red Scare. Fear of socialist rebellion. Anybody want to guess when the second Red Scare will happen? Exactly. Once people get afraid and the hate is ramped up, you can't shut it off. And you're still looking for the others that might threaten you. And you'll see elements of repression after Vietnam, what's going to happen to Muslim Americans after September 11th. That kind of fear happens. It works. It works for totalitarianism. Don't worry about political prisoners right now. I meant to get rid of that. So this is a very good post. I really like this one because it shows the conformity they want. So you notice these are all, okay, they're men because they're potentially soldiers. But aren't they all individuals? You notice they're all individuals, different clothing, different occupations. And what happens to them? They're absorbed into the mass. Individuals, are they individuals anymore? Now this is meant to be pro-war and a good thing, but isn't that kind of scary? Every totalitarian state emphasizes the mass, the state, over the individual. In fact, that'll be one of the symbols. Fingers breakable, fist unbreakable. You don't matter, the state matters. No, we're not going to break fingers today. Well, I mean, we've broken fingers. It's fun, isn't it? If you haven't broken a finger, try it. We've broken leg, collarbone, nose, rib. I've had bad luck. Some of you have had just as bad luck as me. Neck, back, oh, you know. I did my neck once. It was not pleasant. But here's a good thing. Now, this is your basic, join the fight, nationalism. Okay, I like this for a couple different reasons. First off, this artist clearly had a crush on this model. Right? And this is one of my favorites. Just for some reason, the idea, gee, I wish I were a man. So that's telling men, you're a wimp and she won't like you unless you join. That one does it too. This one, it's not subtle at all. I want you, implying that she will like you. I think that's hilarious. I got to be honest, though, I'm pretty sure you're never going to meet her. And one more thing. Advertising today does not use illusions like that at all, the cell phones. Never. It's amazing how it's never changed. It continues to do that. And show people like that. Okay, so, but that's not really effective. What's effective? How do you get people to hate somebody? You fear them, and it's all enemies. U-boat attack, see what happened with the U-boat attack, right? And little Belgium, and it's not hiding. We all know what's going to happen, with what it's implying will happen to her, right? And there's enough elements of truth combined with propaganda to bias point to hate. And that's all enemies, not just people who might be Germans, but also those who are against the war. And you combine that with such effective propaganda and the shock of the way the war happened in the United States, you have war madness, where the country literally went nuts. It's anger for the Germans. So here's the idea: there's spies everywhere, and the Kaiser as a spider. And are you 100% American? Prove it. In fact, this is when little lapel pins came out, to wear a pin of the American flag to prove you're a real American. World War I, that became a thing. And you still see it today. You always see members of Congress wearing it. In fact, they have it on all. Watch the NFL, and they have a little American flag sticker on their helmets. They have it in baseball uniforms. I mean, it's. And the thing about it is, let's say you were a German spy. Any of you are a German spy? See, you've learned the first lesson to being a spy. Don't admit you're a spy. If you were a German spy, what would be the first thing you would buy? Wouldn't you buy a lapel pin and have it on? If you were a German spy, wouldn't you be holding a sign like this? To hell with the Kaiser? Which, by the way, the little kid, their parents are quite proud, I'm sure. It's just kind of scary. Spies don't come out and say, "Hi, I'm a spy," because they won't be a spy very long. Laws like this don't root out spies. They don't find spies. You're trying to control your population. But think how the war bandits work. Here, a poster against dachshunds. But they're not dachshunds. What are they? Liberty pups. They would change the name. A lot of dachshunds were killed. I'm not making that up. What are you, German? That's war madness, isn't it? That's war madness. And look at these German atrocities. Okay, Limburger cheese is pretty tough. Blood sausage, though? But they changed the name. Sauerkraut became what? Victory cabbage. Right? So you're a good American. Hamburgers. Hamburgers became Salisbury steak. Frankfurters became hot dogs. Because we're not Germans. The monarch of England, the family was Saxe-Coburg, which that's a German family name. They changed their name to Windsor because of anti-German feeling in Britain. And they're still now the House of Windsor, the royal family in England, because of that. And that gives you an idea of what happened, but that's just by names. People with German names would be stopped on the street, they would be attacked, beaten up, ambushed. Homes of people with German names would have rocks thrown through the window, some were burned down, some were ran out of town. My great-grandfather, because started by my great-great-grandfather, right when he came here from Germany, so my mom's maiden name is Schatz, Schatz, and that's German. They had a grocery in a little town south of Omaha the little town's called Papillion. Okay, it was a little town then. Now it's a town of about 70,000. But then, okay, little town outside of Montana. In Montana, that'd be the third biggest town. But he had a town called Schatz's Grocery. Just a little grocery store. Back before cars, so you had little corner grocery stores because you had to walk everywhere and you didn't have refrigeration, so you needed to go every day. The big window in front was broken all the time. People come in and knock stuff down, steal stuff, throw paint or even blood one time on the sign. He was attacked all the time because of that name, Schatz, because he was a German name. Now, he would not change his name, so they remained Schatz. So my uncle was still Schatz, But a lot of Schatzes, Schmidts, people with German names, changed it to Smith, Schatz, Schmidt, Smith, to an English name. A lot of people with Eastern European names, they changed their name, partially because it's hard for English speakers to pronounce some of them, but a lot of them, the tie-in with socialism, they changed their name. And so that's war madness. One of those steps towards, it's scary, even though it did not happen. Obviously, it's bad what's going to happen in Turkey. But the point is, the steps happen in total war. Yeah.
Didn't they do that in Ellis Island too? Like people would come through and they just like change their name.
Sure.
However, like the person checking their name pronounced it.
Yeah, they would get somebody and just change it to. They would hear the pronunciation and put it to a more of an English or British name closer to it. Yeah. And they would find out, oh, that's my name. So that did happen, and that was a lot of it, especially because of just the pronunciation issue from Eastern Europe, especially, or Russian, because of a different language. But with that happened here in your lifetime. And the best example of this whole victory cabbage and how crazy it was, when the United States attacked Iraq because the U.S. claimed that they helped terrorists and were were having weapons of mass destruction, which a lot of people knew that wasn't true then, and it simply was not true. But the US wanted to invade, and they wanted allies to justify the invasion. They especially wanted our powerful European allies. And none of them, well, all of them except for Britain said, no, this is crazy, especially France. France is like, this is insane. They don't have weapons, and it's going to be a disaster, and it would destabilize the Middle East for years. Do not do this. And there was a lot of anger against the French for not joining in this invasion that of Iraq. Iraq never attacked the United States. So we had to engineer this. And there was such feeling that a lot of people started being anti-French. They would throw out, I remember seeing this on TV of people having parties to break bottles of French wine and their anger against the French. People did all kinds of stuff. But the Montana State Fund, which invests in stocks and bonds to build up money for like pensions for like teachers and government workers, they divested. I mean, they pulled out money out of French companies and lost about $13.5 million because of that. Which, by the way, for a little state like Montana, $13.5 million is a lot of money. I know for us it's a pocket change, but for Montana, that's a lot. And the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives, they had a resolution to change the menu in the House diner. So for members of the House, for two items, French fries and French toast, became freedom fries and freedom toast. That's war madness. And they are one of our closest allies. They just didn't want to attack Iraq. And as it turned out, they were exactly right. So, yeah, French got that one. But with that, we have a number of political prisoners all over. 3,500 in the nation, over 400 in Montana. These are mugshots of 3 Montana residents who are arrested under the Sedition Act. I put down this is what he was arrested for. And some person turned him in and he's going to register at the post office for the draft. His name's Theodore Clipstein. And look what he was arrested. And look what his sentence was for saying those words in the United States of America. Pretty amazing, isn't it? He's basically saying, why didn't they tell us about this war? We didn't know. We just all of a sudden in it. And he was dubbed to be a traitor. He would serve 3. But still, sentence 4 to 10. And the other people, I found a bunch of them, but I thought this was one you could really see that. Wow. I mean, that's not like saying, I want Germany to win. That's, I wish you would have known more about this. I don't like the war. And wars are political decisions. And people have said worse, but they wouldn't go. Nobody's attacked more than socialists, and the leading socialist labor union was the International Workers of the World. International Workers of the World, but everybody called them the Wobblies. And so, they went to go attack the I jumped the gun. The Wobblies, who, like the Knights of Labor, the kind of their successors, wanted one big union of workers. And their idea was, it was workers killing workers while the wealthy banks and businesses got rich. And this cartoon is supposed to show it's being planted by workers and you're getting nothing but death. Yet the merchants will get all the profit. And the way the banks did, there are elements of truth there. But in the era of the time, all these people were so upset with the anti-war movement. Look how they take the IWW and turn it into, whose face is that? That's the Kaiser, implying that they're traitors. By the way, that's their symbol, the IWW, Sabocat. What city in Montana were the Wobblies big in? You can guess, lots of workers from all over the world. Butte, America. In Butte, 1917, over 10,000 people in Butte, workers came out to hear Frank Little, a national IWW organizer who spoke out against the Selective Service Act. Said, we do not have to go fight the war. So 10,000 came out here, cheered him, loved him. Butte was 100,000 people in 1917. Think about the demand for copper during the war, just exploded. Well, he gave this speech, members of called the American Liberty League and some police officers went to his hotel, drug him out, and they were going to solve this problem. As they saw he is a traitor. By the way, what do you call somebody who takes the law into their own hands?
Vigilante.
Yeah, that's a vigilante. They drug him out as they saw he is a traitor, and they're going to make an example of him. They beat him up, tied him to the back of a car. Many people say it's a police car, but that's never been confirmed. Drove him, drug him all over town, and then hung him from that railway trestle, which is still there in Butte. You can go visit it. That's called lynching, torturing somebody to death. And then put this over town, and then hung him from that railway trestle, which is still there in Butte. You can go visit it. That's called lynching, torturing somebody to death. And then put this sign. You know what that means? Yeah.
So dimensions of a grade.
Yeah, this is how a lot of people think they are. And who would use that as a warning?
Remember vigilantes, but that's
Mostly Henry Plummer's, but the vigilantes in Helena, 1860s. And this would become, so they're using that allusion to the Montana Territory. And actually, this is on like a Montana Highway Patrol has 3777 on their uniform. And it's kind of worrisome that they would use vigilantes as something to idolize. Especially the vigilantes in Montana were pro-Confederate murderers. And you know, they were anti-Union, pro-Confederacy. They murdered the governor, Thomas Francis Barr. And okay, that bothers me. It bothers me so much that I am the co-chair of the Vigilante Parade. Okay, so, yeah.
What was the speech about? What was the speech about?
Anti-war, anti-selective service. Yes, I am the co-chair. I can't believe we have the second longest high school parade in the world, or in the U.S. And it's about vigilantes. It is a little disconcerting, isn't it? And there's a new high school next. The vigilantes. Frank Little. But it went to the Supreme. Oh, the IWW just crushed. This crushed the IWW. They went after him. In the court case Schenck versus the United States, the Espionage Act was tested in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yes, Congress has the power to curtail actions and therefore free speech. And what they ruled is, you do not have the right to free speech if your speech presents a clear and present danger, then you can't do it. So they can limit speech. Remember, we've talked about this in class before. The First Amendment gives nobody a blanket freedom of speech. It says that Congress cannot abridge your freedom of speech. But that doesn't mean there can't be constraints on your speech. I know that sounds weird, but they're different things. Freedom of speech is not the same as your speech. Freedom of speech in that context is basically, Congress cannot pass a law saying all people with dark hair are not allowed to speak. That's a version of freedom of speech. But there can be bans on speech. Oh, by the way, the example they gave, somebody does not have the freedom of speech to walk into a crowded theater and then scream fire to watch the panic. You probably heard that, many of you have heard that analogy before. And the idea is, therefore, the anti-war movement is the equivalent of yelling fire in a crowded theater. Now, that should actually cause you a little bit of a question. A psychopath who goes into a theater to cause a panic by yelling fire is not the same as somebody who opposes the Selective Service Act. Now, you can disagree with the political decision there, but they're not necessarily a psychopath. I'm saying it could be, but they're not. Yelling theater to hurt people, that's what we call a psychopath. Now, I know it's coming or going. Huh?
You said theater.
Huh?
Instead of fire, you said theater.
Did I say yell theater?
Yeah.
I wanted to confuse them. Theater! You're right. Okay, so with that, Eugene Debs. Did I really say theater?
I think you meant to say no.
Oh, they came out theater? Yeah. Part of the problem is, this is a bad habit to get into. In fact, write this down. when you're saying something, think about what you're saying. Don't think about what you're saying next. You know what I mean? I already forgot. Okay, with that, Eugene Debs was arrested and imprisoned for opposition to the war, especially selective service. And he said this trial is a farce, but he still gave a closing statement. And in it, he made it very clear, as he saw it, this is a way to repress the population. And he came out with one of the more famous statements, and it shows his political point of view, obviously anti-social Darwinism, but the criminal element, as he saw, people who had no choice but to resort to crime to survive, or more importantly, political prisoners. And Debs would go to prison. He'd be pardoned by President Harding, but he'd be from that prison cell, that's supposed to be the Atlanta Federal Prison. He would run for president. There's another Debs button, and would get 1 million votes. And so socialism always has this very confused history in the United States. To this day, people are scared of the word socialism, and at the same time, many people like what they stand for. These people are also exercising their freedom of speech. Congress who makes no law breaking the freedom of speech, complaining about the Sedition Act. But these two women, what right are they fighting for? Yeah, suffrage. And women during the war, a lot of women, especially Britain and France, but also the United States, took jobs that men had. And by the way, with the shortage of labor, it's got higher pay, which of course dropped right after the war. But most women would go back to whatever position they could get before. You'll see a similar thing in World War II, which we'll talk a lot more about a little bit later on. But the suffrage movement continued throughout the war. President Wilson promised. He promised in 1912 he would fight for suffrage. Then as soon as he became president, never said anything about it. 1916, he said suffrage will be a goal of the progressives and the Democratic Party especially. As soon as he became president, nothing. And then when the war began, we're fighting the war. We don't have time. We'll worry about it afterwards. And women had had enough. Remember, this goes back to long before 1848, which was the Women's Rights Convention at Seneca Falls. And women, many women said, no, we're going to keep fighting. The leader of this is her. Her name is Alice Paul, who's, I would argue, one of the most amazing Americans in history. She was a tireless fighter who, a lot of people said, don't fight for it now, we're in the middle of a war. And she said very clearly, what are we fighting for if we don't all have rights? And she stood out in front of the White House with that sign during the Sedition Act. Absolutely fearless, demanding Wilson to do what he said, and thousands of other women joined her, fighting for what Wilson and the Democrats promised that they would do, and some progressive Republicans. And they would eventually give the 19th Amendment, but not without a fight. I'll come back to the amendment in just 1 second, but she would be arrested along with hundreds of others. And suffrage prisoners were treated not just as prisoners, but worse, as political prisoners. And Alice Paul, along with others, went on a hunger strike, and she was force-fed. And this happened the same thing in Britain to other suffragettes. And force feeding, what they would do is, you see this tube and attached to a funnel? They would make a mixture of like raw eggs and flour, kind of mix it up. And then they would take this tube and then add a steel tube at the end that they would stick through their nose and then down their sinuses into the back of their throat. And then they would dump this substance down their throat. And it would choke. So it felt like choking, but the pain, I guess, was unreal. Can you imagine jamming a steel tube down your throat through your sinuses? And yes, it would break bones and things like that. They would force feed. Why were they force feeding her? They weren't. They didn't care. What were they doing to her? Torture. This is torture. Torturing her. So she does what? Say it again. Stops. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. And others who do it, this is what's going to happen to you. She did it. Yeah, Alice Paul is pretty flippin' amazing. Because just the thought of that would, I got to be honest with you, I'd be thinking, yeah, you know, The 19th Amendment this pushed Wilson. Hey, change that you want, especially if it involves more rights or a better life, isn't just going to happen. You got to fight for it. And they fought for it. And it did happen. Finally, Wilson had to do what he promised. This might shock you. A lot of politicians promise they're going to do something, and then as soon as they're in office, they don't do it. They usually get away with it too, right? You know why? Because people don't pay attention. They get away with it, which is really scary. Happens all the time, even today. But they pushed it, and most Democrats and enough progressive Republicans supported it. The last state to ratify would be Tennessee, and finally was ratified. Now, it didn't have age, or just states could not deprive women of the right to vote. And she would then work for the Equal Rights Amendment. Pretty interesting person. I really admire Alice Paul. And so, Prohibition was another issue. There have been movements. Remember the temperance movement we talked about? There was a Prohibition party that was an attempt at a third party. They allied themselves with the progressives. But Prohibition movement became big in the war. The idea is we're all going to come together. Let's fight a war where we also make a better world. They saw this as a wartime measure to quit drinking. Sober workers produce better weapons. In fact, this is implying that since the Hun Rule Association, the idea was that Germans produce lager beer, they get everyone to drink. But one of the big things you might see it, we waste grain. And the first prohibition movements would be in some states where they voted as a wartime measure to save grain and corn. Because that's how you make whiskey and beer come from grain and corn. And so you save that for the war effort. And in the euphoria after the war, the idea is we can make a better world. The 18th Amendment would be ratified. And yes. And to enforce the 18th Amendment, the Volstead Act. Because yes, it did ban most alcohol, but to enforce it, Congress passed this. This is all a wartime measure. This was all wartime. The Prohibition movement got this huge boost. There was a whole thing about drunken workers were causing a bunch of duds in England, and so that kind of fit in there too. But the Volstead Act, and how they enforced it was this. There's no federal police force. Federal laws didn't necessarily apply except for the power to tax. And so they put 1,000% tax on the production of alcohol. And Treasury agents, most of them had worked in the secret intelligence during the war, they would run down people trying to avoid the tax. By the way, what do you call somebody who produces alcohol or buys alcohol and then tries to sell it without the tax? Have you ever heard the term bootlegging? Bootleggers? That's what that is. And think about 1,000% tax. Let's say you sell a barrel of booze for $1. What's your tax? You have to pay a $10 tax. How soon would you be out of business? That's how they enforce it. Did Prohibition work? We'll talk a little bit more about it. Alcohol consumption went down, yet what went up? Crime. Organized crime selling the alcohol, and thousands of people just ignored the law and drank. Not as much as before, maybe less healthy, they binged more. At the same time, as luck would happen, there's nothing really going on now that has a coincidence, as Henry Cost. It's the Spanish flu. It's almost like we talked about this. The Spanish flu, which started in Kansas, but we're pretty sure it started in Kansas. But it got the name as it spread worldwide. Think about how this could turn into a pandemic, the war. All these ships and people moving more than ever before all over the world. And like today, how people move. And about 2% of those infected died. 675,000 Americans died in those. Almost half of the soldiers who died in World War I died because they were in the trenches and exposed to the flu. And it was young people who died. Their immune system would react, and they would go into essentially shock. Older people, younger people actually did not die. And so, for example, like the current pandemic, coronavirus, I'm probably more vulnerable than you are. Spanish flu, you would be significantly more vulnerable than me. It's kind of weird to think about. Normally you think about older people or younger people more vulnerable. Just one of these fluky diseases. But this is the shipyard in Philadelphia, and I just love the don't spit. They did use masks. They also tried bloodletting and a bunch of stuff. It was pre-antibiotics. They had immunizations, but not for flu yet. They had a bunch of quack medicines like malted milk. And we don't know how many millions died worldwide. We have no idea. No idea. Because so many people died that we just don't know if it's the disease or other things. But it started in the spring of 1918, but didn't last very long. And in the fall of 19, it spread like wildfire. That was the kill. So spring bad, or spring fairly bad, scary, went away in the summer, people thought they're fine, the fall, devastating. I hope that's not a precursor. And so, this, see the dark? That's how it spread. And less than a month, the whole country. And since we're on 2 weeks of the coronavirus, we're somewhere in there. You know, it's just the way it is. And that is a woman using a mask to try. She's a telephone operator. Anybody know what that is? That's in Philadelphia. Mask wearers. And they had a big parade for the soldiers who probably contracted it in boot camp in Kansas. They had a parade for them, even though they knew it was going to be bad. They let them do the parade, and they spread the disease all through Philadelphia with this big parade. The only thing that scares me is, I'm just going to say, I just read that New York is still going to have the St. Patty's Day parade. Ah! Yeah, I'm not, I bet, I can't imagine it'd be that crazy. But you never know. People is dumb. Isn't it fun to talk about the Spanish flu while the worldwide pandemic is going on right now? No.
Except for, oil workers.
Well, the problem with plywood is that the oil workers, because when oil dropped down so fast, already two additional fracking companies have gone bankrupt. They're all so in debt, they might not survive. If oil prices stay where they're at now, almost all of them will go out of business.
Thursday, Friday,
I know.
Okay.
I wanted to do the EBQ on Friday, but I don't want to do 1,000 or something like that. And so let me think about it. Tomorrow. I'm going to give everyone the DBQ tomorrow, so we can have a look at the documents, and I'll tell you.
No, it's a seminar.
Yeah, I might just finish the 20s and just do the DBQ. Think about that as that be a test of DBQ.
Yeah.
Which would suck, but then again, right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
It might be easier just for everybody.
And it's so like
By the way, that's my scary flu and everything. This scary.
Exactly. You can't.
That's only
You are a
that might not be funny in like a day.
One day. But right now it is. We'll make sure to put it. Oh, it's not. But that would actually be like.
Oh, I haven't stopped it.
Yeah,
My brother.
that looks weird.